So as I talked about earlier, whenever you're going out to get shots, there's going to be a wide variety of different shots, and you're going to need to modify them based on what you need for your type of, yeah. So one of the things I talked about last time was whenever you're setting up a shot that you're going to need, there's different varieties and different types of shots that you're going to be out shooting. And a lot of those are going to depend on what you need to shoot, and that's going to determine how you shoot that type of video. And so when you're out getting news gathering footage, one of the things that I highly recommend is that you shoot something 3 different ways. The first one is going to be what's called a wide shot. And so when you just set up your camera, cover everything. And this can be an establishing shot to show your audience what's going on, where the event's happening, and the conditions that it's happening around it. The second type of shot is just take from where you're standing, just zoom in your camera a little bit and get a medium shot. So this will give you a little bit more detail about the information that's going on, and it's going to provide that to your audience. And then the third shot that you're going to need is what's known as a tight shot. And with a tight shot, you're going to basically focus on 1 or 2 elements of your story that you want to present. And with each of these, just record about 10 seconds. So go in, get your wide shot, hit record, and go for 10 seconds. Stop it, get your medium shot, 10 seconds, stop it, get your tight shot, about 10 seconds. So without even having to move from your first position, you already have 30 seconds worth of footage. And it is far better to have more than not enough, especially when there are certain events that you cannot replicate or do over again. Much like this balloon release that happened on this one particular day. After the event had happened, you would not be able to go back and try to recreate it. So it's best to have more footage than to have not enough. Now, one of the things that's going to help you get a lot of these shots, if it's centered over the shoulder or a wide shot or a toss shot, is what's known as the rule of thirds. The rule of thirds basically states that you're going to take your camera and you're going to divide it into 3 columns and 3 rows. And by doing this, you can position your camera to display certain sections that you want to draw people's attention to, because not everything needs to be a centered shot. But when I look at some of these, I can see that if it is centered, I'm going to have my subject matter in the middle. Or if I want to offset them for an over the shoulder, I may have my subject matter taking up the right 2/3, so the graphic can take up the left 2/3. And so here's just a few examples of what we see in a rule of thirds shot. So in this upper left, we've got a picture of the Eiffel Tower, but in addition to the tower, they also want to show you the skyline of what's happening in and around Paris. Off to the right, we have a puppy, and this person has been able to capture the image using the rule of thirds, and you can see that the dog is taking up the right 2/3 of the shot, and they're looking off to the left. And by having this extra room, you're able to add a little more depth and information to it. In this picture in the bottom, we have a couple standing on the beach. And the photographer here is highlighting the couple into the shot, but they're also giving them room to show the beautiful background and the scenery that they're in. So this image is not just about the 2 people in it, but it's also incorporating the background. And then this last one, person heard that their kids were being too quiet for too long, decided to go look, and sure enough, chaos had ensued. And so they were able to capture the moment. And again, they used the rule of thirds, even though they probably didn't know it. So on the left, I've got one child. On the right, I've got the second child, and they're spaced out in their separate third columns. In the middle third, I've got the paint, the bucket. And so it's a very well balanced shot, and all this was done using the rule of thirds. Now, we can also take the rule of thirds and apply it to television, journalism, and news. So the first type of shot I talked about was the centered shot. So in this, I have my subject matter in this in the middle third, and I've got some space off to the left and to the right. If I'm doing an over the shoulder shot, I've got my subject matter taking up not just 1/3, but actually they're taking up 2/3. So I have them kind of placed in this 2/3 line, and then the graphic is taking up the other 1/3 to kind of offset the shot. And then even in the toss shots, so if we have 3 anchors who are close together, they each are taking their own third. And since my 2 anchors are kind of looking in one direction, you can kind of feel that there is that separation between the 2/3. Likewise with our sports toss, I have a set of balance of my sports anchor is off to the right side. I have my two anchors are closer to the divider, the first third and the second third. So again, that's creating a little bit of symmetry and balance to help set up your shots. So when you're setting up your shots, think about the rule of thirds. And the other thing that you also want to think about in a shot configuration is what's known as headroom. I talked about this earlier when I was talking about the safety zone, but whenever you set up a shot, make sure that there's always at least a couple of inches above their camera. And in this case, you can kind of see it's getting cut off at the top of my head. So in this case, this subject does not have enough room on the top of their head and they're getting cut off. So a few examples of bad headroom is, again, you ignore the safe zone and your shot's going to get cut off. On the opposite of that, I have two subjects that are being interviewed, and they've got plenty of room above their head. They've got plenty of room in front of them. So you can see that the rule of thirds is being applied well to give them a leadway in front of them, and as well as to provide a little bit of headroom. Now, I'm not going to give them entire 1/3 of space above their head unless there's something in the background that would necessitate that. But for the most part, using the rule of thirds and a little bit of headroom above them, that makes for a very good shot. Now, likewise, another rule that you want to look at is what's called the nose room. And this is, again, going to apply the rule of thirds. So with this, whenever you have an interview subject, you're going to have them in 1/3 of the shot. And then in front of them, you're going to have 2/3 of the content taking up. In this picture on the right, you have the subject being interviewed, and the reporter is actually sitting in the shot as well. So you can see as he's talking, there is 1/3 of space behind him, 2/3 of space in front of him or in front of his face. And this is what's called the nose room. So whenever they're setting up the shot, you want to make sure that they have plenty of room in front of them to look at and just a little bit of room behind them. So when we're looking at nose room, this one works very well. My subject matter has a little bit of space behind them, 2/3 of the screen in front of them, and they're looking off in the direction of the nose room. This picture in the bottom right, this is a bad example of nose room because the subject matter is in the middle of the screen and they're centered. And even though they are looking off to the screen, you can kind of see that it's set up sort of an awkward look. Now, one of the other things that I've noticed with this is the reporter had them shooting from the side, so you're getting mostly just a profile shot. When you're getting an interview, you want to get not straight on, not profile, you want to get almost a quarter, so you're going to be at like a 45-degree angle from the person, so that's going to give them plenty of nose room, and you're not going to get just the side of their head or get a profile ear shot. So one of the things that you may also have in the case of this particular shot, I feel that this subject has far too much room in front of them. So you might want to tighten up your shot so that you don't have a lot of this dead space. Now, a counterpoint that could be made is if they're talking about how the room is now empty. So if this is a case of COVID, as I can see by the mask in his pocket, that he may be talking about how business is dead. So the reporter may have chosen to have a lot of extra room of empty seats for storytelling. But personal opinion, I think this, if that's not the case, then they went too wide and they just kind of lost him in the 2/3. Or they lost him in the space. So this may be a little too much nose room and too wide of a shot. So you may want to get tighter. But again, they may be using this for a background to help tell the story. And I just kind of missed out on that. So again, when we look at a shot, this is for the most part pretty good. I've got good headroom. I've got good nose room in front of them. I've got a little bit of room behind them. The only downside is at this point, they're looking at the camera and not the reporter. So for this shot, this is pretty good. Again, he's taking up the 2/3 on the right. He's got a little bit of room above his head. He's got leadway off to the screen. So this looks like a pretty good shot. My only comment for this one is they shot in front of a window. And shooting television cameras in front of a window are going to give you a bad effect. So in this case, the windows become brighter and we can't see what's actually happening outside. But as far as shot composition, this would be a pretty good shot. And you can even use rule of thirds in extreme close-ups. So again, we have his eyes kind of taking up that dividing line between the first and second third and the second and third thirds. So you can even use the rule of thirds to kind of give you some balance and symmetry even on tight shots as well. So that's going to be just kind of a look at how you can set up your shots, and especially using the rule of thirds are going to help you get a good balance and good symmetry for any shots that